Jamie Miller. I'm with the California Central Coast chapter of the Wildlife Society. Today, we are hosting folks from the High Mountain Lookout for their 19th annual Lookout Open House that this year is virtual. We are also celebrating the 25th anniversary of the High Mountain Lookout being in existence, which is pretty exciting. This event's pretty near and dear to my heart. I was an intern at High Mountain back in 2005 and volunteered for a few years, spent an awful lot of weekends up at High Mountain. So first I'd like to introduce our board who is joining. We have Jackie, our chapter president, Sean, our chapter president-elect, and Andrea, our chapter media manager. If you guys want to unmute yourselves and say something for a second, go for it, and then I'll introduce our speakers.
Hi, everyone. This is Jackie Hancock. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the whole team. I'm really excited to be a part of this year, and I'm really looking forward to the presentation. I put in the chat, we're going to be monitoring questions in the chat. So if you don't feel like raising your hand or speaking up, then we will be able to get to your questions after somebody speaks.
Hey everyone, Sean Wagner here. I'm president-elect of our chapter, and I'm really looking forward to the event. And thank you all for being here today. And yeah, so it'd be great. Thanks.
All right, well, I think Andrea stepped away for a second. Both Andrea and I will be recording the event today. So if you don't want your face being recorded, just please keep your cameras off. I'm going to ask that everyone just stays muted during the presentation so we don't get any background noise. And yeah, feel free to use the chat to ask questions, and we'll interact in that way. We'll get started this morning. Steve Schubert is going to be giving us a history of the Lookout project and give us a brief Condor Recovery Program update. We'll take about a 5-minute break after that. And then Kevin Cooper will be giving us an overview of the geographical landmarks around the Lookout. And then Marcel will be talking a bit about fundraising. And after that, we'll have a social time where we can just chat with each other, get to know each other, and also use it as a general question answer session. If you have any questions that we didn't get to right after the presentations. So with that, our first speaker, Steve Schubert, comes to us from San Luis Obispo area. He's currently in Washington. He attended Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and received his master's in field biology and life sciences secondary teaching credential. He's taught high school biology and earth sciences and has taught natural history courses for Cuesta College community programs for more than 25 years. He also works as a naturalist instructor at a local residential outdoor program called Camp Keep, or Kern Environmental Education Program here in San Luis Obispo County. He served on the committee that published the book Wildflowers of San Luis Obispo and an ebook called Plants of the Carrizo Plain, and authored the book entitled The Peregrine Falcons of Morro Rock, A 50-Year History. He's the past president of Morro Coast Audubon Society and is the volunteer coordinator for the High Mountain Lookout Project. And so today he will be telling us a bit about the High Mountain Lookout project over the years. Kevin Cooper, who will be speaking after the break, began his career in 1980 at the University of Montana studying grizzlybear ecology, working summers as a backcountry ranger and wildlife researcher with the U.S. Park Service at Mount Rainier and Crater Lake National Parks. After completing graduate school at the University of Alaska and Oregon State University studying Rocky Mountain elk, he moved to San Luis Obispo in '87 to work as a biologist on the Los Padres National Forest, where he worked as a district, zone, and finally the forest biologist before retiring in 2018. Kevin supervised the Los Padres Wildlife Fisheries, Botany Range, and Watershed programs and worked with interdisciplinary teams to mitigate project impacts to wildlife, conduct wildlife surveys, write NEPA and ESA reports, monitor project effects on wildlife, and respond to litigation regarding forest programs such as developed recreation, wilderness management, road and trail management, fuels treatment planning, timber management, oil and gas development, range management, wildfire suppression, and watershed management. Kevin participated in forest land management planning and worked with other federal and local agencies to manage species across political boundaries on efforts such as the California Recovery Team. And finally, Marcel, who is our fundraising guru. She's worked at the Lookout since about 2005. I remember spending days at the Lookout with her way back when. She has mostly worked on staffing public event tables with the High Mountain Lookout display and helping to train Cal Poly summer interns in opening and closing procedures at the Lookout and tracking California condors. She's also been a volunteer with Pacific Wildlife Care since 2007 and is currently serving on their board of directors. So thank you to our speakers for joining us today. We really appreciate all the work that you guys have done for High Mountain Lookout. And with that, I will go ahead and stop my screen share and hand this over to Steve for his talk.
All right, and thank you, Jamie, for all the work you've done in helping us out for all these past years as well. I'm going to begin a screen share here of a slideshow. So I need to mention that I'm speaking to all of you from the Inland Pacific Northwest. I have a vacation / seasonal home here in the mountains north of Spokane, Washington, and this is where I've spent the last year and a half sheltering at home during this pandemic. So I left the Central Coast area and never been out of California this long since childhood, but I do need to mention that I have fairly slow internet service. So often I notice my video might appear a little glitchy or my audio is not synced with the video. But once we get going with this slideshow, I think things should go just fine. So with that, I'm going to get that started. I'm spending a moment here setting up my screen so I could see everything. All right, let's see if we can get this started. Well, today my goal is to give you all a overview of the High Mountain Condor Lookout Project. It's 25-year history. How'd that happen? How'd that go by so fast? And also a really brief update on the California Condor Recovery Program as well. And give you some background information, how we all got involved with this project and how we're still up and running, hopefully post-pandemic. So High Mountain Lookout is a Forest Service facility located in Los Padres National Forest. It was an operating fire lookout for many, many years until finally shut down, more or less, abandoned, and unfortunately vandalized and took a beating over many years. But it has a long history and today is a restored, functioning facility. Located in on the summit of the Santa Lucia Mountains at about 3,200 feet elevation in the Coast Range province. And we found some old scrapbook photos with some surprising photos. Here's a lookout structure that's quite different than the present structure, dated 1961. So we are interested. When was the original lookout built on this site? We'd sure love to learn more history about that. I was contacted some years ago by an 80-year-old woman who read about us in a newspaper article. She notified me, I interviewed her, and she told me her parents staffed this lookout during the World War II years in the 1940s, and one of their functions was to look for potential enemy aircraft flying along our coastline. So that was some fascinating history. So today, this lookout is functioning as a biological field research station, and we're also cooperating with the California Condor Recovery Program. Just some real brief background. The condor population took a drastic decline over the years, and there are multiple contributing factors, including habitat loss and secondary poisoning, for example, caused by lead exposure, likely feeding on carcasses, being that they are scavengers. And some of the sources of lead exposure apparently has to do with lead shot in the carrion that they were feeding on, highly toxic. So that's a huge mortality factor that's affected their decline. But eventually the population reached an all-time low of only 22 individual condors in the year 1982. Controversial decision was made to bring all the remaining wild condors into captivity. So this is the actual last individual condor captured with what was known as a pit trap method, using a calf carcass as bait here. And this was brought in on Easter Sunday, 1987. Technically, the species was sadly extinct in the wild, but a very successful captive breeding program was established at a number of facilities. And by 1992, the first release of young juvenile condors back into the wild took place. And here are some of the present day locations, including north of the Grand Canyon, Arizona, and even down into Baja, Mexico, where condors held in release pens for a number of weeks to even months before released for their first flights, free flying in the wild. Notice here at Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge that there are some previously released condors outside the pen who come to visit. And some of these are now adult birds that actually serve as what are called mentor birds to these young juveniles. In more recent years, a much closer location for releasing condors to the Central Coast area is in the mountains in the San Simeon area. And those are now more or less in our own backyard if you're a member or a resident of the Central Coast area. Here's either staff or intern folks doing their work behind one-way viewing glass where the condors don't see you, don't hear you. And there is going to be a release coming up very soon, in just a matter of days, at the San Simeon release site. Here's an example of one of the original wild condors from the wild population that had been brought into captivity and released 30 years later back into the wild. Again, one of the motivations for this is that these older birds still remember their old haunts, their roost sites, their nesting sites, and they can act as mentors to these young release birds. So good news, after that drastic decline in population from 22 individual birds, the world population now exceeds 500, and more than half of those birds are wild, free-flying birds, and a number of them are now nesting. And so there are wild born chicks in the wild, and these are important milestones for hopefully a recovering population in the future. The birds are managed intensely, including trapping and handling. Often on a yearly basis, they may be given, for example, vaccinations like bird flu, avian flu virus vaccinations, their weight, they're tested for lead toxicity and then released. But they're also fitted with transmitters. So they may have, for example, radio transmitters, and a number of them with GPS transmitters that send out signals, and they can be monitored from great distances, especially with GPS, where with satellite telemetry, these birds can be tracked. And in fact, here's a recent movement of a condor from Central California all the way up to near Mount Diablo in the San Francisco Bay Area, and returning all this pathway in one single day. A tremendous flight path. And this made the news just recently. So some of the value of being able to track these birds. They are fitted also with colored bands on the leading edge of their wings, and you can log in as a citizen scientist and report your findings. For example, condorspotter.com is a website where you can actually identify any visual sightings that you personally come across. So with that, I wanted to get back to focus on the history of the High Mountain Project. Originally, it was a memo of understanding between Morro Coast Audubon Society, which I represent, and Los Padres National Forest, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which manages the Condor Recovery Program. So going many years back, we've had some important planning sessions, and as time went on, we were able to recruit more collaborators, including the Cal Poly Biological Science Department. I suspect this is Jamie here, the best I could tell. And Dr. Francis Villablanca originally was the supervisor for the student participation in our project. So we're really proud to be able to pull in Cal Poly as one of our very important collaborators to this project. And we've had some mini symposiums and pizza dinners to celebrate there right on campus. So San Luis Obispo County is in the heart of California condor, or condor country. And in fact, High Mountain Lookout is situated in a very strategic location with the release sites to the north in the Big Sur backcountry and Pinnacles National Park, and further south down into Ventura County, for example, and Kern County, Bitter Creek, and Hopper Mountain National Wildlife Refuges. Notice how centrally located the High Mountain site is, and this places it as a valuable site, hopefully, for helping to track the movements of the condor population. And we have found over the years that we often pick up signals at great distances, and we're able to help contribute to the tracking program. In fact, our very first intern, Cal Poly student intern, Paul Andriano, that was one of his job duties, was to help with the radio tracking program. We're really proud of this participation, and I was just tabulating yesterday how many students have played a role as hired seasonal interns, and the number is now 65 students have been associated with our project as summer field interns since the first established internship in 2002. We send them out to get field training experience before we put them to work at the lookout. So sometimes they get hosted by the Ventana Wildlife Society, Big Sur location, or we send them down to Southern California, like to Hopper Mountain, and more recently, Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge. This is an opportunity for the interns to actually get hands-on, up-close field experience. Some of them are seeing birds for the first time they've ever had visual sightings of condors. And once they get working at the lookout, they might not actually get visual sightings. They might just get signals as they're tracking. So this is an important part of their internship field experience, but they also are conducting other field research projects. They've set up a number of GPS plots in the area in different habitats, such as chaparral, oak woodland, and streamside or riparian woodland. And over these years, each batch of students goes out in the field, sometimes literally crawling on hands and knees through thick brush and chaparral to find those GPS plots and conduct field research projects, including vegetation surveys and small mammal trapping. There's been a lot of field data gathered over the years, and some of this data may be valuable. Let's say a major change comes through the ecosystems in the future, like a wildfire, and we'll be able to do both before and after field data research. So we hope that this has been a valuable work experience for our interns. It's a resume building experience. Some find out field work's just not what they're made for or interested in, and others have gone on into careers that they benefited from this field work at High Mountain Lookout. Well, another important function that's been reestablished is that our staff and interns on duty can also now continue the historic function of reporting fires and smoke. And there have been a few times where we've been the first call in to reporting local fires. So how did this all come about as a restored functioning facility? We'll get to that in just a moment. By the way, if you make a visit, you're going to have a great 360-degree view. A lot of folks who live near the coast aren't really all aware that this project even exists in the backcountry, but there's some outstanding views that Kevin in particular is going to present to all of you after my talk today. So I'm not going to elaborate on geographic features so much, but notice out in the distance is the Pacific and our coastline around Pismo and Guadalupe Dunes area. Down below in the foreground, Lopez Lake, some fog rolling in through the Santa Maria Valley. Looking inland, the Ponza Range. Down on the valley floor is the thriving community of Pozo. And under good weather conditions, when we don't have, for example, San Joaquin Valley smog and dust, in the winter in particular, if you look across the mountains here in the distance, are the snow-covered Sierras. And that's spectacular to be able to see those kinds of views, not happening on a daily basis. I want to point out the Timbler Range, by the way, here, which borders the Carrizo Plains. And along the foothills of the Timblers, this is the trace of the San Andreas Fault, the boundary, the tectonic boundary between the North American and Pacific plates. It's a lot of interesting geology, including an outcrop of green serpentine rock below the lookout. This is California's official state rock, by the way. And it's my understanding this marks the trace of a major fault line known as the Rinkanata Fault. So I also want to point out some aerial views. If we look down below the ridge line where the lookout is located here, High Mountain Lookout, down below is the Santa Lucia Wilderness area, including these fantastic rock formations, including the Huff's Hole Cliffs. And from a distance, there's this formation known as the rock formation here is the Vacara Sandstone, which is, by the way, the same rock formation as the famous Painted Rock on the Carrizo Plains, where you can see the Native American pictographs. And up close, those sandstone cliffs are a several 100-foot high escarpment. And look at all those eroded caves and potholes. This is nesting habitat where California condors historically nested many decades ago. And I came across these photos that were emailed to me. And for years, I've only known that these photos were taken in the year 1969. And here's a condor chick in a nest on those cliffs. And it's again my understanding that this was the last known successful nesting of condors in San Luis Obispo County for a 50-year period until just recent successful nesting in 2019 near the San Simeon release site. Well, that's the only information I knew about this photograph, was that it was labeled 1969. And just 2 days ago, I was emailed by the field condor biologist who found this chick in the nest. And he's going to make a visit to High Mountain very soon. And he's going to be on the phone with me talking about his experiences and his efforts to document nesting in the late 1960s here at Huff's Hole Cliffs. So I was extremely excited that he got in touch with me and also sent me his field notes from this period of time. Well, we have been going back in monitoring these cliffs in recent years. And one year I was with a group and I raised my binoculars and oh my goodness, we found a condor perched in a pothole on those same cliffs. So we are hoping that condors do eventually find their way back and reoccupy this historic nesting cliff site. So we were able to get out the equipment and identify this bird. I want to mention Mike Tyner, one of our early interns, student interns at Cal Poly, from Cal Poly, really important contributor to this project. Sadly, Mike passed away in a tragic accident. So we always honor him and he's always in our thoughts. So a real fuzzy photo of that condor in flight. It turned out it didn't nest that particular year on our cliffs, but it did become a nesting bird in the Big Sur backcountry. So we do want them to hopefully find their way back. My involvement with this area and High Mountain in particular goes back to another endangered species that was nesting on this cliff site, the highly endangered peregrine falcon in the 1970s, only a few known nesting pairs in the entire state. So members of our local Morro Coast Audubon Society chapter submitted a proposal to the Forest Service office and suggested conducting a volunteer falcon nest watch during the nesting season, where Audubon volunteers staffed that lookout and kept a watch on those nesting cliffs for falcon nesting activities. So in fact, this is the precedent for what much later would become the Condor Lookout Project. But I fortunately have some of the actual field notes that some of these folks kept, and years later in storage in someone's garage, someone found them, and I now have these actual notes in my possession. This is some valuable information. Look at that. It looks like mechanically typed notes way back then. And in fact, they kept bird lists as well. And I decided to tabulate all these old bird lists into an eBird site and contributing my own bird observations. You can see here on the text here that within the 3-mile radius of High Mountain Lookout, so far I have tabulated over 100 species of bird observations. It helps to represent the tremendous biodiversity of this area. So I was one of those hired falcon nest guards in the late 70s, hired by our local district of the Forest Service, camped out for over 3 months. My work partner was John Schmidt, who is a renowned bird artist and taxidermist. And we just had some amazing experiences monitoring this falcon nesting site. We actually had a wild condor visit during this field work in the late 70s. So this ink drawing of that bird that visited the Huff's Hold Cliffs has actually been used in many, many other speaker presentations over the years. So John is actually one of the contributing artists to the National Geographic Field Guide to Birds. If you happen to have a recent edition, you should look up his name as one of the artists to the field guide. So many years later, more as a volunteer than an employee, Kevin and I began making yearly treks into Huff's Hole just to continue searching for peregrine activity. Some good news that this species is fairly recovered and removed from the endangered species list. But it was in one of those visits, cutting our way through dense brush, and notice Kevin's in the lead helping me out because he has to cut through the poison oak as well. We came out to our parked car at High Mountain Lookout, and both of us on that very day in 1996 came up with the thought of restoring this old, broken down, vandalized building. And could we put it back to use, in part to function as a condor tracking station? And that was the beginning of this project 25 years ago. So I wrote a letter to the Forest Service District Ranger 20 years after the original Audubon Falcon Nest Watch, and we proposed a condor tracking lookout station. And with that approval, we needed to get to work. So this is the very first work party, 1996, where we had to start removing a lot of the broken down, vandalized facilities, including all that broken glass, putting up a new gate that might help restrict some of the public visitation, where folks were just using the lookout as a place to party and often cause damage and havoc. So this gate was one of our initial efforts to reduce some of the access that could result in potential vandalism. So this was the very, very first work party day. And then we had a lot more evaluating to do, what to do to fix this place up. So at first it seemed like we were tearing it all down, removing roofing and damaged flooring material, hauling it away to the landfill. Some folks literally thought the lookout was going to be completely disassembled. Here's Kevin removing the window frames. And I know these photos are all in sequence, but some of them are actually taken months or years apart. It would actually be several years after we boarded up those windows before we could return with frame glass windows to reinstall. We also made a decision to use the downstairs area as a visitor or interpretive center. So here we are putting up framing over the cinder block walls. Had some painting work parties. Again, this photo sequence of photos is actually spread out over more than a year's time. Another initial planning meeting where we started to brainstorm what kind of support, what kind of financial commitment would be needed to keep this project moving forward. And that's when we invited board members of the Morro Coast Audubon Society to make an on-site visit and hopefully encourage them to really get enthused about this project. And it turned out that this was really crucial with time because we needed to raise significant funds to move forward. And the Audubon board did pass a resolution and initially funded nearly $20,000 in funding that helped us get going forward with, for example, hiring contractors to do restoration work. So here's a before photo. And this major restoration work began in the year 2002. And here we have contractors putting in nice facilities that we hope encourage visitors and volunteers to come staff and camp out and enjoy the opportunity to be a part of this project. So for example, we have water pumped up from the holding tank down below. So we have running water, we have a solar powered electricity, a gas powered oven. Here's Michaela producing one of her wonderful meals during our work parties. We did have a propane tank reinstalled, so we have propane gas services. And that same year, 2002, is when we decided to look into hiring our first Cal Poly student intern. So here's Paul Andriano, probably looking at us wondering, what in the world am I getting myself into? Because he had some memorable experiences that first field year working alone. So that was the same year we were able to reinstall our glass, Pozo fire crew hauling that heavy glass back up to the lookout for us. And things are starting to shape up. One way to try and protect that glass from folks just shooting through it with the guns and rifles was to have a welder help us put up some very heavy duty metal shutters. And so far we're fortunate we haven't had significant vandalism events since. Let's keep our fingers crossed on that one. We do haul in our potable water supply. Jim here lives in Pozo and hauls up water for us occasionally, pump it into our water storage tank. Oh, here's another room with a view, of course. And we did install solar panels on the roof of our facility. So now we have electrical service and lighting. Also installed a weather station that's operational most of the year. It does need some repairs right this moment, but when working, this is an online weather station that we can access the weather conditions from afar. And in fact, local meteorologist John Lindsay is often checking out that online weather station and sometimes refers to weather events at High Mountain Lookout. Here's, for example, a recent post he posted on his own site with a view from High Mountain Lookout and the weather conditions. Sometimes even snow events, rare but fun when it happens. In the early years of the project, we also evaluated developing some interpretive signing. And so notice some of John Smith's artwork that we used for our new sign, had a nice kiosk built for us and installing it for the first time at the lookout. And then the old original sign had taken a beating, so that's been removed and we have a nice new sign to be installed to welcome visitors to the lookout facility. This was a year that a wonderful artist, Anthony Prieto, volunteered to come up and paint a life-size condor drawing on the lookout he's actually listening to a football game in his earplugs while he's working on this. And even though our old condor drawing is faded over the years, this is still one of our favorite artwork renditions that he put up for us. And we even wonder if this even gets the attention of condors in the distance who might come to closely investigate. A friend of mine made a surprise quilt for me using that artwork. We have had some media coverage over the years. For example, the Tribune newspaper, Audubon magazine featured an article about condors, and in particular the lead exposure problems. So some of the same staff members, Condor staff members who helped us out at Condor Lookout were involved with this Audubon magazine article, including the artist Anthony, who I just discussed. And this Cal Poly student found this photograph in a published book about California condors and used that to develop a wonderful metal sculpture that he produced for us for our interpretive center. So here's the early stages of the very small visitor center, maybe only about 10 by 10 feet, but we're proud of it. And we encourage you to come visit. We covered up the water tank with more wall so that we could develop this nice glass display case. And Amy, a Cal Poly student, produced the specimens for our exhibit as part of her senior project, which is required of all Cal Poly students for graduation. So a number of them have completed senior projects over the years and done research here at High Mountain Lookout. So we encourage you to come visit when we're open and functioning. Unfortunately, we're shut down presently during the pandemic and cannot open the facilities at this time for public visitation. We're looking forward to things getting back to normal. If you do visit, sign into our guest register. And we also encourage kids and families to make visits. So we do have interpretive materials ready to get out for you and give you some background information and updates on the California Condor Recovery Program. Here's an example of how the lookout is being used, not just for condor tracking in particular, but as a field research station. This is a Cal Poly microbiology professor doing field work, live trapping rodents in the High Mountain area. And she was doing blood sampling and a Lyme disease study. And so we were thankful that the lookout had another function here as a field laboratory while she did her research. And then these little critters, after they had their blood samples taken, tagged, recorded information in the data sheets, they were released. This is a kangaroo rat or K-rat being released back into the wild. So we also have some other fun wildlife sightings, sometimes completely surprising and unpredictable. Kevin and his wife Mary encountered this bobcat family not so long ago. There are interesting reptiles in the area. The coast horn lizard is a declining species in the area and may potentially be declared a threatened species in the future by the government. And watch your step when you're walking around. You never know if you might encounter a rattler. Occasionally we have bird feeding stations set up. Some interesting visitors will show up, including the Merriam's chipmunk. And by putting up hummingbird feeders, besides the resident annas that are year-round, we often encounter sometimes large numbers of migrating hummingbirds passing through. So that's one of our volunteer duties, keep the hummingbird feeders filled day after day. They also come down to our little water bath. That one little water bath has enticed a lot of birds into the area from the dry surrounding hillsides. We also offer guided field trips. So here, Kevin and I are leading a either Cub Scout or Boy Scout troop on a field trip. And notice after recent rains, we were walking down the trail and we found these very fresh bear tracks heading right in the direction of the lookout. Well, it turns out just one of our open house events just 2 years ago, we had bear sightings on one of our outings This was only 2 years ago, a mother with cubs. They found our presence and went racing down the hillsides to escape. I woke up one morning after camping out overnight upstairs and walked around and found fresh mountain lion tracks all around the base of the lookout. So that had happened while I was sleeping in a sleeping bag just a few feet above that night before. Big surprise. We've also set up some remote wildlife cameras with some interesting camera trap photos, including the native gray fox, brush rabbits, running roadrunners. I think this is a golden eagle in flyby. What an amazing shot to be able to capture that with a remote trail camera. And then occasionally bipedal human beings as well passing by. This is a mountain quail, not the native California quail, but the mountain quail with the beautiful long plumes. And the tail end of a striped skunk passing by. So this is one of our student intern projects as well. They also set up trail cameras in the high mountain area and have had some interesting camera trap photos. And every once in a while, this helps prove that high mountains is still an important recreational destination for hikers and joggers and backpackers. Well, shouldn't be backpacking here, but there's a campground down the road. We've even seen folks biking, horseback riding. And I have to say, more time than I can imagine in the last 20 plus years, it's been this past year and a half of the pandemic, we've had more requests from people contacting me, can we please come visit your lookout? Are you open? And unfortunately, I have to usually turn folks away, but I do encourage them to still hike in from our locked gate if you'd like to make a visit to the site, as long as the roads are open and weather conditions are suitable. This is still in Los Padres National Forest, and there's a lot of people wanting to get out of the house during the pandemic and make visits to this site. One year, a nice deck was produced with picnic tables. So when people do ask to make visit, I encourage them to come on up and have a picnic lunch and just enjoy the view. We had a contractor once help put in electrical wiring to help make the lookout a little more lightning safe during occasional, especially summer monsoon lightning storms. Kevin produced these lightning stools with glass bottom feet. So if you're on duty during a lightning storm, you should actually sit on these lightning stools for protection. Occasionally we do vegetation management, especially since that chaparral is very fire prone vegetation. And so more examples of workday parties, especially with volunteer labor. We've had in very recent years, the Ranch Wi-Fi internet service that services rural areas. We came up with an agreement. They could set up their hardware to help service their customers, but we also benefit by now having high-speed internet access. It also helps operate our security cameras. And very recently, we have a 360-degree rotating fire detection camera on our roof. So we appreciate their participation, but we realize, oh, it kind of detracts from the beautiful view to have all that hardware on the roof. So fortunately, we came up with an agreement where they were able to relocate it away from the actual lookout itself. Much more suitable location. So we often end our work days with socializing. So here we are having a potluck dinner. Once in a while, we'll find another destination like the famous Pozo Saloon, where we had a discussion meeting. I can't even tell you what we discussed after maybe having a beer or two at this particular location. And we often have our planning sessions among staff and volunteers at folks' residences. Well, you can imagine this isn't happening recently either during the COVID pandemic. So we've adapted. We've even gone virtual now in more recent times to try and keep this project alive and operating. I did want to mention that Dr. John Peregrine here, also Cal Poly professor, has come on board in more recent years to help us out with supervising the Cal Poly student internship program. So we appreciate his involvement as well. And again, as I mentioned, some media coverage. This Tribune article mentioned High Mountain as one of the top 10 secret spots to visit in San Luis Obispo area that a lot of folks just didn't know about. And just 2 years ago, the High Mountain Project was a cover page story of New Times, for those of you who are local and are aware of that publication. So we're real pleased with that kind of media coverage. So I'm going to start wrapping the program up by mentioning that every October, including today, we've had a tradition of an annual public open house event. And we try and get folks to come on up. I know some of you are wondering what's the driving like. It is a 6-mile off pavement drive when you leave Pozo. And we never recommend you drive this road during recent rainy conditions. It becomes wet, slippery. And in fact, the county and the Forest Service can lock gates and prevent access to this area if the roads are not safe for driving. So you do have to be aware if the gates are open and weather conditions and if it's drivable. But when we do have good conditions for open house events, we've had great participation in the past. 1 year we were presented a certificate that shows our lookout is now in the National Lookout Register. Sometimes we've had some very esteemed guests come visit during our open house events. On the left is a renowned, of course, retired now, but retired Fish and Wildlife Service condor biologist Sandy Wilbur. And on the right is renowned Jan Hamber, who still in her early 90s is involved with the Condor program. She is the keeper of the records and has an immense knowledge of past condor field research. She was featured in National Audubon magazine just a year ago. And we're just so pleased that she's taken an interest and a love for this project as well at High Mountain Lookout. In fact, beginning next week, 5 young condors, all females, are going to be released from the San Simeon Release Facility. And they decided to name, in honor of 5 renowned conservationists, they named all of those 5 female condors in honor of renowned female field conservationists, and that includes Jan Hamber. That's the name of one of those to be released condors. During our event, and today Kevin will be doing the same virtually, he will give a 360-degree roundabout geographic landmark presentation. And we're going to do that today with all of you as well, but Kevin is going to do that with you virtually. He also relocated the original firefinder after many decades of being put away in storage. And that is the original High Mountain Lookout firefinder that was used for many, many years to report smoke and fire detection. During this event, we have different field trip leaders offer birding field trips. In fact, just a few years ago, we found a relatively rare surprise in this area, a sage thrasher, totally unexpected on one of our birding field trips. We also demonstrate condor radio tracking and encourage any members of the public who are interested to perhaps become involved as our future volunteers. We do offer training sessions for new volunteers. So we do set up tables. This is the actual Arizona staff members setting up their table 1 year at our open house event. We were pleased to have them come join us. Marcel always sets up her table, checking folks in, and she's involved with merchandise and fundraising aspects. She today is going to briefly do that as well following my presentation. We have sometimes raffle drawings where you can win prizes. So you're almost always guaranteed to have a condor sighting if you come to one of our events. And Marcel will talk a little bit more about possibility of merchandise sales as well. So during our after lunch activities, during the open house events, we offer guided field trips. I've invited over a number of years my past Cal Poly geology professor, David Chipping, to please give a geology overview. And he is an extremely dynamic, animated speaker. We're always pleased to have Dave come up and give his geology talk. This is Dr. David Keel leading a plant ID field trip. Dr. Keel, by the way, is presently authoring The Flora of San Luis Obispo County, so that book publication should be out in the near future. Dr. Dirk Walters, also one of my past plant taxonomy professors here, is leading a plant ID trip. You can see how I put all my past Cal Poly professors to work, even though they're all retired. And he's pointing out a beautiful patch of poison oak. Dirk and Dave have both contributed to these field trips so many years that they've also compiled a wonderful checklist that highlights, for example, the plants that have been recorded in this area, the plant species. We also have invited guest speakers who give updates on the Condor Recovery Program. My past Huff's Hole Nest Watch partner, John Schmidt, has been invited speakers. John is a world-renowned expert on feather identification, for example. And then kids' activities, including making plaster of Paris tracks that they can take home with them as souvenirs. So we want this to be a family-friendly event. We've had Girl Scout troops even do work party sessions for us while they attended the open house event. For those who stay through the entire day as the sun begins to set, we have an early potluck dinner event. And we've had some great potluck servings. We also have wine and cheese tasting. In fact, the local Sausalito Canyon winery, in our honor, once developed a high mountain label, and proceeds from the sale of this wine were given as a donation to our project. One year we weren't able to have our open house at the lookout because of bad road conditions, so the winery helped sponsor that event on site. In fact, during this slideshow presentation here, Scott, you're joining us today. Scott from the Forest Fire Lookout Association was one of our speakers at this actual event. So back up to the lookout, when we're on site, we do have wine and cheese tasting as an annual tradition before dinner. So I encourage you to stay for that if no other reason at all. And folks just have a good time hanging out, enjoying, socializing, talking, having dinner. And then of course, dessert. You have to come to this event if for no other reason to sample Jim Duff's pineapple upside down cake. That's another yearly tradition we always look forward to when he brings that up for dinner. So those who stay even longer into the night, besides enjoying wonderful sunset vistas, and I have to say, when I took this photo, even though it's fuzzy, I consider that to be a beautiful silhouette of a condor cloud. If you can find the wings, the elongated neck, the head and the beak, I call that a condor cloud. And we do have evening guest speakers who speak to us outdoors. We use the wall of the lookout to project with digital projectors our slideshows. This is again Sandy Wilbur, a condor biologist, reading about his Huff's Hole field experiences from his own book that he authored. And Jim setting up a generator so we have power. This is Joe Burnett from the Ventana Wilderness Society, who helps run the San Simeon release program. This was the crew from Arizona speaking one year about the Arizona release program. Jeff McLaughlin was presenting a documentary movie that he had produced. These photos, again, are all years apart, but to show you that we've been fortunate to have guest speakers willing to make the long distance trips to join our event. Sometimes we have technical difficulties. The projector wasn't working, so we had to use the laptop instead of the big screen viewing. We always invite past Cal Poly interns to be among our guest speakers. And in fact, one year, Paul Andriano, our very first intern, the year 2002, was invited back. And this is an example of how he went on into field work, working with birds of prey and benefiting hopefully from this research experience he had at High Mountain. And this particular talk he gave was about his raptor research in Mongolia, helping to trap and band saker falcons. So an example of how that this internship program helps hopefully benefit many of our students who go on into field careers like this. You have the option of camping overnight during the open house event. There's no camping near the lookout unless we hold this event and we make a kind of an option, where otherwise you would be camping out 1 mile down the road at the Forest Service campground, almost always guaranteed to have a bear sighting during the sleepover events. This is the very first year we've had to go virtual. So I want to again thank you all for joining in today. Let's hope beginning next year, our 20th year for the annual open house event, that we can go back to being in person again. I do occasionally lead field trips to Cuesta College community programs for those who enroll. We've had a number of field trips over the years. I've been a guest speaker at different meetings presenting this same topic. We have developed a nice exhibit, especially at the annual Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival. Here's Marcel staffing the booth. This will be the 25th year, by the way, of the Winter Bird Festival. So we're pleased to be invited as part of that. And even more recently, we've been invited to set up our exhibit at the Atascadero Zoo, which has an annual event during the month of April. So educational outreach is an important aspect. And in fact, we want to thank again the Central Coast chapter of the Wildlife Society for hosting this event today. I couldn't have done it myself with my slow internet here where I'm at. So we set up our booth as well at their annual event, usually in the month of November, where they have a wildlife symposium. So I want to wrap this all up by showing you some, you got to always end with sunset photos too, of course, but High Mountain is known to astronomers for its dark sky viewing. And so for many years, astronomers have shown up here, setting up their equipment. And in fact, one year I was contacted by an astrophotographer asking if he could have access so he could film the Perseid meteor shower during the month of August. So I opened up the facilities with him and hung out. I lasted till after midnight, but he was up until daylight the next morning, monitoring several of his different cameras, setting up wonderful time-lapse astrophotography. And you can actually see the Perseids streaking across the sky here in these photos. So if you want to learn more about our project, I encourage you to check out both our website, condorlookout.org, and the facebook.com Condor Lookout Facebook page. And you'll find a lot more information and updates and what's going on with this project. And so with that, I want to thank you all for hanging in there with me. That was a long talk, but I wanted to kind of highlight a 25-year history and how this project hopefully will continue in the future to play a role with condor tracking, and hopefully the condors will refine their way back to this historic condor nesting site area and will have an even more relevant valued function so close to condor country. So with that, I finished the slideshow. I'll stop the screen share here. All right. I could see some more folks have joined in, so I'd like to say hi to all of you now that I could see. I haven't been able to follow the chat box, but I could see a number of folks here, some familiar and some are new. So again, thanks for joining in, everyone. Jamie, do you want to help, and Jackie, with monitoring any of the questions that should get my attention? Are there any particular questions I should be answering?
Yes, Steve, there was one question from Steven. He wanted to know how long the condors have been released in San Simeon.
I was afraid someone might ask me that. I don't know the exact year. We're talking about fairly recent years. The Ventana Wildlife Society has been involved with condor releases since the early 2000s, but I believe the San Simeon site was established sometime within the last 10 years. Again, that I'd have to do some more research into. I'm not sure if Marcel knows the answer to that question.
I don't, but I do remember when they were building the pen up there, and I would say maybe 8 years, because they've been doing releases for at least 4 or 5. But the building might have been 8 years ago.
Well, I am opening the chat box, so I'm just skimming through people's comments. First of all, thank you for the positive feedback, but also just reading some great information about some of your own personal experiences. Yeah, Jamie,
thank
I
you
know
so
you
much.
and Mike had a special connection, so we all
Yeah, yeah.
we all
I
met
wanted to
Mike.
thank you for your presentation, Steve. That was really great. It made me miss those days of working as an intern up there. Yeah, I remember Mike Tyner. He was the first person up at the lookout that I actually encountered up there, and he trained me on the radio telemetry and showed me around. It was a really great introduction to the High Mountain Lookout project.
Well, Jamie, we just have to get you to come back. That's all.
I would love to.
We'll entice you back somehow. Come back and be a volunteer again.
Yeah, I am definitely one of those interns from back in the day. It's this experience has definitely shaped my career as a wildlife biologist. So I'm very appreciative for the opportunity to have worked at the High Mountain Lookout.
I'm reading Joel's comment about more information on the San Simeon release. And Joel, I think Marcel can elaborate on that in a few minutes. But specifically the Ventana Wildlife Society website and probably Facebook page definitely has information on the upcoming release. And if I remember right, it's next week as well as early December, and they will have live streaming of those releases of those 5 young female condors. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm all talked out. I need to stop listening to myself for a few minutes.
Yeah, if we don't have any more questions, we can certainly take a 5-minute bio break before we jump into the next part of the presentations. Steve, did you have any more words to talk about the Condor program recovery update? I think we pretty
No,
that. I don't.
I think I wanted to keep my part fairly brief about that. If anyone has specific questions, I'll do. I'm not an expert. I'm not one of the actual field staff members with hands-on experience with the Condor program. I'm more of hopefully an educator and like to disseminate the information, but I'm not necessarily always completely up to date. But I'll do my best if I see any more questions during our event. Yeah, let's take our 5-minute break and then we'll go ahead. Sorry, Jamie.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I know that the Ventana Wildlife Society does do regular Zoom meetings. And I believe you can find more information about that on their website. I just posted a link to their website in the chat.
And Jamie,
and
can
so
you put up that slide that I sent you that had the 2 dates of the upcoming releases? And that could just be up there for people to look at, that one slide that has the upcoming 2 release dates. They're going to divide the females up into 2 different, I think they're going to do 2 or 3 next week on Tuesday, and then they're going to do the rest with Aniko in December. And of course, it's always weather permitting, but that could be up there while people take their break, and then they could have that access information.
I'll
Yes,
just put
give me one
this
moment to
in
organize
there.
myself.
It's
and
my,
yes.
it's also my understanding that Ventana San Simeon site is holding the young birds that are going to be released in the Northern California redwood country this spring.
Mhm.
So some of the San Simeon birds are going to be transferred to Northern California for release as well. Yeah, how about we all meet together back at 10:15, and that's when we can have Kevin join in and give us his geographical tour.
That sounds good to me.
All right, we'll see you in 5 minutes.
10:15.
All right, well, I have the time as 10:15. If folks are back, Kevin, do you want to get started with your talk? I can stop my screen share.
Absolutely. If everybody's ready, I'm ready to go myself.
Great. Really quick, we had one question in the chat. Do condors ever fly over the ocean? Lucille says she's usually at the beaches viewing some birds. I responded that they certainly are on the coast. One of the release sites is in Big Sur, and condors have been known to feed on marine mammal carcasses. And there have also been records of some of the condors even been down on the beach at like Vandenberg Air Force Base, Space Force Base, where I currently work. I don't know if anyone else has input on that question. Yeah,
I
Steve.
could mention briefly that when condors were found feeding on a whale carcass in the early 2000s, that was the first documented evidence in 200 years since the Lewis and Clark expedition of the early 1800s had written in their journals about condors feeding on whales. So that was one of those milestone events of them finding natural food sources like marine mammal carcasses.
Yeah, that was a really good question. Thanks, Lucille. With that, I guess, Kevin, go ahead and take it away. You should have access to share your screen.
Okay, I'm going to do that here. Start this up. Hang on a second. All right, let me open that up all the way. How's that looking to you guys? Is that pretty good?
Yep, that looks great to me.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks, Steve. That was an awesome presentation. I just loved it. Really well done as usual. Really hard to follow Steve. Of course, he's got such a finely tuned presentation. It was really fun to see all those pictures of those years. I can't believe it's been 25 years, but it's been a great run. Thank you so much, and all the people involved. It's been so many people to make this come together. I think that's one of the funner aspects of it. That and seeing the success of all the students that have gone through, including you, Jamie, and everybody else. So it's been really great. Well, one of the things that I've been doing since retirement is flying my drone to help study vegetation recovery after fires and to map out ecological reserves and things like that. I have brought it to the lookout, and in this video, I just did a circle, and you can, of course, see the lookout in the foreground, and you'll probably recognize that from a lot of Steve's slides. And I just went around the circle in a 360-degree circle, and from that we can look in the background. I can talk to you just about some of the things that we're seeing. One of the things I did is several years ago write up a kind of a document, a guide, if you will, excuse me, based on your azimuth of your compass direction, what you're seeing. So if you had a compass, you could take a look at things out there. So anyway, you'll see me glancing down that occasionally, but right now we're looking pretty much to the north, maybe a little bit to the northeast. And in the foreground is the Pozo Valley. And in behind there, I made my arrow really large. So I hope you can see that. Can you see that, Jamie? There it is.
Yeah, I can see it. It looks good.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm pointing at the Black Mountain radar installation that's across the way. That's 10 air miles from where we're viewing right now. Back over in this gap to the right, Steve had some pictures. Actually, you can see on the far right. We'll go over there. That's the top of the Sierras, and Mount Whitney is actually visible through one of these gaps. It's 150 miles away, and so that's some really good air quality. Has to be great to see it, but we do get that kind of weather in the winter and in springtime after we have storms that move through and clear out all the smog from the Central Valley. So I'm going to start up the video and we'll move it over clockwise here, beginning in just a moment. Let me see if I can move this out of the way. Here we go. I think Steve was visiting that day. We're doing some work. You can see the solar panels on top of the lookout and the condor peanut on the side. And There's our outhouse facilities behind there that we hope to improve very soon. So I'm going to stop as we're looking straight down into Pozo. If you've been there, we're looking about due east right now. And here's the High Mountain Campground, and the road comes up through this valley and comes out and crosses the Salinas River, which is down in this valley right here. The Pozo Valley, here's the dirt road that goes across the fields to the Pozo Saloon, the Pozo Fire Station, if you've been out there. Lots of big concerts at the Pozo Saloon. And of course, that's where we had some great dinners after our work days over the years. This is all the national forest over here also. This is Los Padres National Forest. La Panza Summit, there's a road that comes up and goes over that right there and out to the east to the Carrizo Plains. And on the right is Machesna Mountain Wilderness. Back in here in 1995, 96, Dave Clendenin from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and I built a condor release. We organized the whole thing and had all kinds of volunteers, not least of all who were I think one of the four-wheel drive clubs here that helped us out. We built a condor release area right up here in a place called Bear Trap. Also Castle Crags is actually where it was actually at, but one of the historic condor nesting sites. We had it all up and running. And unfortunately, the 1996 Highway 58 fire burned this entire mountain range across here, including everything that we built. So it was just 6 months after we put it up. We did have several releases and the condors were in the area. And I think a couple of those may have perished in that fire. But, the condors are still in that area. It's just not as close as we'd hoped they'd be. But one of these days they'll come on back. So over here is the Garcia Ridge Road. It's a four-wheel drive route that goes out just across the top. Interestingly enough, it goes through the Garcia Wilderness right here, which is all around there. One of the places, the Los Padres National Forest, that has not burned in the 30 years that I've been here. One of the very few spots. Keep our fingers crossed. We're moving kind of over to the south now, and you can see the upper Salinas Valley over here. And down and to the right, we're moving into the view shed of what's called Trout Creek. Oops, see if we can get that out here. All right. Okay, so I'll stop this in just a moment as we look down in here. One thing, Steve, you mentioned backpacking in this area, and some people do go backpacking in here. It's actually part of the Condor Trail. I'll show you a picture of that trail here in a moment. And it does go right by the lookout and continues down through Trout Creek, out over here. This cliff face is called Balm of Gilead, and continues southward. This Trout Creek has water in it. Of course, it does have trout. It's a really nice area. The Forest Service is picking up some private parcels and making that part of the National Forest, so we can all access that area and go through there. Let me point out a couple things in the background. This is Las Palitas Mountain back in here, and we're going way down to the south and the east towards Caliente Peak. So showing up in the background over here in this corner, I'll let that come around a little bit. Way out in the haze is Highway 166. That's Cuyama out here, the Cuyama Valley. You can see some of that haze coming in from the Central Valley. You can see the pines up here on Pine Ridge. That's over by the Wasna Ranch and Agua Caliente. Stony Creek is coming in through here. This ridge line that goes up to the right, and this long sloping ridge line that goes up over here is part of the Sierra Madre Ridge in the San Rafael Wilderness area. And that's right over in here. Behind that, I'll let that move around a bit more, but you could see Mount Pinus back in here, way over by Fraser Park at the top of the Grapevine. Down in this valley here to our right is called High Valley. It's a beautiful oak woodland that has great flower shows in the springtime. And on the right here, you'll see some of the rock formations that Steve showed pictures of where the condors nested and the peregrine falcons were, where we did some of the work way back when we met in the late 80s here. So way in the background here, we can see all the way down into the San Rafael Wilderness. And this is Big Pine Mountain over here, this large peak. And then moving over this way is McKinley and San Rafael Peak. Over here is called Cachuma Saddle and Figueroa Mountain way down by Los Olivos. This valley is called the Wasna Valley over here on the right side. We're kind of moving to the south, and you can see a large green patch on the right side of your screen. You might remember that from one of Steve's slides that talked about Sausalito canyons that make the wonderful wine that we've all had to been able to taste at some of the open houses. You see that long arcing ridge line above that valley. You can see High Valley Rock. That's the top end of the cliff faces that the condors nest off to the right. And looking way down to the south, I'm going to stop it now. We're looking way down over here. This last ridge in the distance would be east and west Camino Cielo above Santa Barbara. This is part of Vandenberg Air Force Space Force Base. I think I got that right. Way down in here, and of course down by Lompoc, and actually this is actually part of East Camino Cielo. This is Vandenberg over in this area. Lompoc and Santa Maria are down in this direction. You can see some very white, glistening, it looked like lakes in the distance now on the right. Just on this side of that last ridge, that is actually strawberry fields or raspberry. They're just the plastic covers that go over those giant fields down there. It looks like a reflection off of water. You can see a reflection off of water way down off of Santa Barbara here, straight beyond the lookout at this point. That's the Pacific Ocean down in there. And of course, you can see the Pacific here at Guadalupe, all the way up to Pismo on the right side. The water source here, that's Lopez Lake, of course. And Arroyo Grande and Pismo would be off to the right here. Just over the hill and out of sight beyond this green would be the cliff faces below the lookout where the condors have nested, and we've seen peregrine falcons recently too. Lopez Canyon is coming in from the right side of your screen. And you can see the old lookout site right here. Steve mentioned the old Osborne firefinder. That was a part of the lookout that was here from the 1920s. And Steve and I found that at the Pozo station, buried in dust in the attic, and I cleaned it up, and it's really interesting. It's at the Pozo fire station right now. Hopefully we can bring that up next year at the open house. The hills straight out in the distance, right? The last ones you see before the ocean are above Pismo, and it's called Pismo Preserve right there beyond the lookout. And the canyons coming in through here, this long canyon is Lopez Canyon. It comes along the East Cuesta Ridge, which is here in the middle grounds. This is East Cuesta here. In the far distance would be the Irish Hills out by Diablo, and right through this notch would be Avila Beach. You can see the road that goes out the ridge to the north. It dead ends up by the Big Falls trailhead up there about 5 miles out, or you can hike down from the Rinkanata trailhead down to the Pozo Road out there. Coming back around to the northwest, you're looking at all of East and West Cuesta ridges that go all the way up along our coast here. If you're in town in San Luis Obispo, you would be looking out your window at that. Now the valley near Santa Margarita is starting to appear on your right. Okay, a couple of things I'm going to point out here after I stop this. Here's the ridge that goes out to the north. This is called Rinkanata Peak. There's an old mine site up in there. This is East Cuesta. This is West Cuesta, way out here. Tasajara Peak and TV towers are way over here on this ridge line. Santa Margarita Ranch is in here, and the town of Santa Margarita is about where the arrow is. Above that, Rocky Butte, and that's where the Condor release is near Cambria and Caicos, up in that area right now. You can barely see this peak. That's called Cone Peak, way up on the Big Sur coast. And then the next two biggest peaks over here, this is actually Junipero Serra Peak, up by King City, east of King City, way up in the Fort Hunter Liggett military base. Kind of in the haze would be Paso Robles. You can't see it right now. And as we'll move a little bit more to the north, you can see that rugged chaparral covered country with lots of rock in there. Tucked into that would be the Santa Margarita Reservoir, the Salinas Reservoir, Santa Margarita Lake, it's called sometimes. The Salinas River runs due north, straight down that viewshed all the way up to Monterey. It's tucked in there pretty tight. You can't really see it from here. It's a little bit hazy to the north, but as we come around, we'll once again see Black Mountain up here on the right side of your screen. You can see some of that blue serpentine rock that Steve talked about. That's all over in this country. It's associated with the uplifting along the coast ranges. And if you drive to Pozo from the north, that road will be coming down through this valley, right in through here. And then again, there's Black Mountain and the radar installation on the right side of your screen coming up. Way in the distance would be the hills up near Parkfield. Okay, that's going to do it. Well, we got a little bit more. Mary and I went out to the lookout a year ago. We've been taking care of it during the pandemic and cleaning things up. This was on the solstice last December. So we got a little bit of sunset action here, which is not too late in the day. I think that's probably around 4:30 at that time of year. It's a beautiful place to come visit. I hope you can come up there and look at it sometime. If you've not been there, it's a wonderful place to go and explore and do some hiking and just capture some wonderful views of the area. Okay, there's a couple other things I wanted to show you while I've got this. Let's see if I can show you a couple other screens that I have. There is a camera now. It's called the Wildfire Camera. This is a camera system we put up on top of the High Mountain Lookout. And this is a system of fire cameras that CAL FIRE is operating, and we are working through this cooperatively with Ranch Wi-Fi. And you can see there's a map of all the different camera stations up on peaks around this whole area. So if you ever want to get a good look and see what's going on, from the high points, here's Black Mountain. That's the radar installation we're just looking at from a distance. But we do have a couple of high mountain shots right now. It's fogged over. There may be some issue with this as an older view, but that's a view from the high mountain camera right now until we get a clearer picture out there.
Kevin,
Yeah.
we're not seeing anything that you're describing. We're just seeing kind of the frozen of the lookout. So.
Oh, okay. So that didn't. I must not have shared the screen with properly. Let me see if I can redo that. Hang on a second. That must be. I'm going to stop screen sharing then and see if something else will come up. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
you might need to stop your screen share and reshare if you shared just your video.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to do a new share and see if that comes up. Let's see if I can do the desktop and tell me if that changed anything. Did it work?
Yes. Yeah, we can see your desktop now, your whole desktop.
Okay. Great. Sorry about that. I just wanted to show you this, alert wildfire map on the right. And you can't see the screens, the website, maybe you can at the top. It's called alertwildfire.org, and it shows a map of all these places where these towers are that show a viewpoint real time. And the high mountain ones are down here. There's two of them. One is stationary, one revolves, does a 360. You can just click on that. Let's go up to Black Mountain, and that'll show you the real view right now from Black Mountain. It's actually just across the way. So it's an interesting site if you're into the view sheds from the high areas. It's of course used for firefighting, but it's really fun to look at. And High Mountain is a part of that program. So that's all I have to show you for now. Any questions? We can go back and look at things if you'd like to, but otherwise that was the 360 that I had from the lookout. And I'll stop the screen sharing here. Let's see. How do I give that back to you, Jamie?
You'll just need to say stop screen share. You might need to mouse up like to the top of your screen, and a little drop down thing will come up.
Okay, let's see if I can find that. There it is. Okay, gotcha.
Yep, there we go. Well, that was great. I really enjoyed seeing that. Thanks, Kevin. Really cool footage of the lookout. Does anyone have any questions for Kevin before we move on to Marcel? And Marcel's going to be talking about fundraising.
I have a quick question. I don't know if you mentioned it, and maybe I didn't hear, but the Sausalito Ridge, do you know how that was geologically created? It's so unique and very interesting.
I wish Dave Chipping was here. Some form of uplift that he could give much more better explanation than I can. But Steve, do you remember anything about what he said?
I vaguely think I might be able to explain it, but I'm just going to invite you to come to next year's open house event and hear Dave Chipping say it in person. So I don't get myself in trouble if I say something misleading. I know around Lopez Lake area, there's a lot of outcropping of Monterey shale. And there are, for example, clam fossils and shark teeth fossils in that formation. And it was like a deep sea basin similar to today's Santa Barbara Channel. But the Sausalito curving ridge, I'm not real clear on the geology of that. We'll have to look into that. Tune in next year.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to Marcel and fundraising.
I'm just glad that almost everybody stayed. I thought, oh, at the end, maybe they'll all be gone. Well, I bought this cute little condor at the Santa Barbara Zoo, and I keep thinking it'd be fun for us to have some available for sale, but we don't. We do have several different ways. Jamie, did you want to put up that slide about how to support the project? Once that slide is up. So right now we're holding a little online auction. Thank you for the 3 of you that have signed up and are bidding. The auction is at a location called biddingowl.com. And when you get there, you can click on the featured auctions and just search for Morro Coast Audubon, and it'll come right up. There's an image that you'll recognize of the lookout. And you click on that image, and then above there is a green button that says View Items. And you can see if there's anything you want to bid on. And if you find something you want to bid on, then you have to register to bid. And the auction closes tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So today after this, you can go look and see what's there. I'll give you a few ideas of some of the neat things that we have. One is this beautiful poster that shows Big Sur with the Julia Pfeiffer Burns and a condor over the head. It's just a nice poster. We have some artwork. We have some t-shirts. Some of them feature the lookout. So we've got this lookout t-shirt with a mug that comes with that as one of our items. But then, maybe you don't want more stuff at your house. And so you don't have to buy more stuff, but you can always buy things to wear. So we also have an area down below that's kind of like you can buy it now rather than bidding. And you can get a high mountain hat. There's high mountain hats. And we also have this wonderful, Forest Service green t-shirt. They're available. The sizes are all listed, what's available, of the lookout. So those are just some of our own things that are available for sale. You can also go to the condorlookout.org website, and there is a gift shop button, and you can find more items through Cafe Press. We get, a small amount of money from those items, but they include things like mugs and other designs of t-shirts and license plate brackets, and there's even tote bags and different items that you can get through Cafe Press. But if you can just donate to help support the lookout, the funds would go through the Morro Coast Audubon website, so morrocoastaudubon.org, and they actually have down below a place where you can target where you want your funds to go. So you would choose High Mountain, but you can also choose the Mike Tyner Intern Fund. So if you want to support the students that come up, Steve has in the past given them stipends at times, sometimes gas money. Sometimes we'll give them, a gift, buy them a shirt or something like that when they're through with their internship. So that Mike Tyner Intern Fund was formulated in honor of Mike. And you can also send a check. And so there at the bottom of the screen, you have the Morro Coast Audubon P.O. Box that you can jot down. But you should note on your check, if you do send a check, that it should say High Mountain in the notes on the check or in your note, or the Mike Tyner Fund, so that Morro Coast Audubon treasurer knows that the money should be targeted to that if you don't want to go online and do your credit card. So hopefully you'll support us by either going and finding some of the featured items at our Bidding Owl thing until tomorrow, or you'll go to Morro Coast Audubon and make a donation, support the lookout.
Thank you, Marcel. And I've put some of those links in the chat. If anyone has any issues getting to those websites, you can certainly reach out to us at the California Central Coast chapter or to Marcel or Morro Coast Audubon. There are a lot of people that can get folks connected with how to donate. Does anybody have any questions on that? Or do we want to discuss bidding wars on various items? All right, well, thank you, Marcel and Steve and Kevin for your talks today. I guess now we can open it up to a virtual social time and a meet and greet. If anyone has general questions, wants to chit chat, the floor is now open. Feel free to unmute yourselves, turn on your cameras.
I just have a question regarding, has the organization ever, or maybe you guys have already thought of this, partnered with the Native Californians? Because I know that the condor is a really strong representation for their native rituals and all that. And I was just wondering if the organization has reached out and did any type of partnerships, events, because you guys have a really great program. It's very cool.
Well, I see Steve
can
nodding
briefly-
yes. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Well, the reason I raised my hand is because I have an audio delay where I'm speaking from, so I don't want to interrupt anyone. I'm going to briefly answer that the High Mountain Project at this point in time doesn't have a direct relationship with a Native American group, but they are very involved with the Condor program in general. For example, they often are invited to the releases. Native American elders sometimes give a prayer or a chant before the release of the birds into the wild. They are being released in Northern California, I believe this spring, in direct coordination with the Yuroks, the Yurok Native American tribe. So they are definitely involved with managing and monitoring the condors that will soon be released there. So that's kind of a brief answer that I can give.
What part of Northern California, Steve? Do you know?
I
I'm curious.
believe Redwood National Park area. If anyone else can help me with that,
Yes,
that's how I'm familiar with it.
yes.
Cool.
So the biggest soaring land bird in North America will be released into the tallest growing trees in North America, the coast redwood.
And also, I want to say that the Ventana Wildlife Society worked with a couple of tribes recently to name some of the birds that were being released. And those birds were given native names, and they had the opportunity to get to know the birds and get to know their personalities, and then assign them native names. And those were, I think, maybe last year's or the year before. It's so hard with time these days, but I believe that those birds that were released all had a native Esalen and another tribe, I can't recall names. They were given those names.
Yes, many of past releases over many years have been named in honor of Chumash as well. So many of them have Native American names as well as their tag numbers. They actually are given names. So
Thank you.
well, I'm just personally going to say hello to several of you. I see a few familiar names. Several of you are volunteers with the Lookout Project. Thanks for joining in, including Dave Lawrence today and Joel Weiss. I want to thank our Morro Coast Audubon Society President, Judy Newhouser. She joined in with the session today. Oh, and Carolina too, one of our long-term volunteers. So good to see some familiar faces or names on the videos. And I also want to one last time give a big thank you to all of you with the Wildlife Society, Jamie, Michaela, Jackie, and Sean for hosting this event and making it possible. Last year, we just simply canceled the event during the pandemic. We just gave up on it. So this was our effort today at trying to keep a tradition going long-term, and we'll look forward to year number 20, a year from this month.
I see some PWC people too. Hi, Asul.
Hey, Scott McClintock, if you're able to join in, we'd love to have a quick update from you representing the Forest Fire Lookout Association. I haven't had communications with you now in several years.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, very good. This thing actually works. Been real busy lately getting a lookout tower up and running just east of Monterey called Choose Ridge Lookout.
Oh, yeah.
In Kevin's video, we looked at Cone Peak. And if you went another 18 miles north of Cone Peak would be Choose Ridge Lookout. So we're in our third year of operating that lookout, and it's been a big project getting that all fired up, but it's up and going well.
Are you going to be letting people spend the night there?
The staff does, but it's not set up to rent out to the public because there's access to radios and other stuff that you wouldn't want the public messing with. But the staff does spend some overnights, and there've been some real scary windy nights that they have reported back.
It gets windy up there.
Scott, months ago, I received an email from one of the volunteers at Shoe Ridge. I didn't know anything about that lookout. And she sent me a photograph of a high mountain lookout patch that they have on site there. I didn't even know that old patch even existed. So she sent me a photo of it. So we do have a connection.
Very good. I think I came across that on eBay and picked that patch up, and then I mounted it in a frame and put it up at Shoe Ridge. Don't know what the origin of that patch was.
I don't either.
I don't remember.
But it's on display now for everyone to see up at the ridge.
Great.
So Steve, can I say something?
Hi, Judy.
Hi.
Please say
So-
something.
So I just want to say how impressed I was with your presentation. I've known about the High Mountain Condor Lookout for a while, and I've been up there a couple of times, but I really didn't have the deep history. And I just want to say, as far as Moorcoast Audubon Society is concerned, I mean, this is the perfect project between research, education, conservation, and collaboration. So I want to thank everybody who has been long-term part of this and is just beginning to be part of it. Thank you all for your participation and dedication. It's a pretty remarkable project.
Mhm.
And I want to thank you for your huge support. There's so much changeover in board membership over the years that we have sometimes felt a little frustrated that, new folks come on board and they really don't know anything about this project or its history. So you are a huge supporter, and we appreciate that.
Well, I'll give you a slight update. Just briefly, I'll be going up there on Monday to work with Ranch Wi-Fi to help them modify our gas line system and keep everything up. My wife, Mary, and I have been going up on a regular basis to just kind of make sure everything's in shape. The whole lookout on the inside is kind of taken apart right now, but just to keep the mice out of there so they don't take over. But in the meantime, it looks really good, and we're looking forward to getting it open. We'll see how the winter goes, but maybe next year we can get up there. I sure hope.
I wanted
I have a
to
question.
mention that, let's go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry, Steve. I have a question. When we do eventually return to normal operation procedures, how would people get involved with volunteering at the lookout if people wanted to start going up and helping to track condors, helping to staff, just getting more involved? How would they go about doing that?
I'm going to start briefly, but I'm going to let Marcel finish that up. If you go to the condorlookout.org website, there is contact information. And I am your primary contact person where you can email me directly and say, hey, I'm interested. For example, Dave Lawrence is one of our newest volunteers. And even though I knew him personally, he got in touch with me about that. And then we can go from there. For example, Marcel and Joel have provided many hours of training experience for new volunteers. We do ask you to make on-site visits a number of times with our own staff and volunteers before you try and take it on personally. For example, staffing the lookout. We're pretty flexible in the amount of time you're able to give and what you do. Maybe you're not really that interested in tracking California condors with radio telemetry, but you'd like to open our visitor center and interact with visitors, for example. Part of the goal is to have visitors on site or staffing on site to help protect our site from future vandalism. So there's a lot of different opportunities for volunteering. So again, I encourage you to get in touch with me, and then we direct you to other folks like Marcel, Joel, for example, that can get in touch with you personally. Marcel or Joel or Kevin, does anyone want to add to that? Anything I left out?
I'd like Kevin to add in, there was some new restrictions during COVID having to do with the volunteers not being able to go. Do you know about that, Kevin?
Well, of course, we didn't, the Forest Service didn't want the volunteers going up there, and having interactions with the public and having it open that way. So that was the main reason, just for the same reason they still have not opened their offices to the public yet. So I think we need to wait until the local regulations allow for, more visitation, and probably back when we get into the non-masking stages of our COVID restrictions, we may be able to get that open again, but we'll see how that goes. I think we're headed that way, but we're not there yet. So that's the regs for now. So we can go up there as volunteers individually, for family units, my wife and I, and keep things going. But and people are still walking up there. We get quite a few visitors, that I see from our security cameras. Just you see them walking up. We're getting 10 or so a day, at least in the weekends, sometimes even more, 15 or 20 a day. So it's pretty popular. I mean, people are going up there and enjoying the walk and the view, but they're just not able to go inside. So yeah, we hope to be able to put it back together pretty soon and then have folks come on in and have someone there.
Hi, Julie.
Good morning.
Mhm.
Hi, Julie.
Joel, are you out there?
Yep, Joel's there.
Oh, good.
Are
Hey
you
Kevin,
there?
how you doing?
Doing great. It's good to see you again. We gotta get up to the lookout. We gotta get that weather station going again.
Yeah, no, I've been doing a little research on that, and whenever we get to the point where I can get up there, like you say, when the access is more available, I want to get up, take a look at what the equipment would make sense, what the website reporting and monitoring would look like and that sort of thing. And it sounds like from what you were just saying that we don't really have a sense for timing at this point. It's still, generally off limits.
Well, it's not off limits if you want to go up there, as an individual or with me. I think that's can be worked out. I think it's what they don't want is for us to staff the lookout, be in there, and then have it open to the public. So there's some differences. We can work it out. But if you want to go up sometime, I might be going up Monday and then a week from Monday also with Sibley. So I don't know if you're available or want to check it out. But
Okay, yeah, I'll touch base on that. Did you have a sense for how to look out in the road weathered the recent big rainstorm?
that I don't know. We'll have to see. They got that clay lands. It should be dried out by now, but I don't know what happened to the road itself. Most of that rain seemed to soak in. So, and we got quite a bit up there on the ridgeline, maybe 4 inches.
Yeah, I'll bet.
We'll have to
Well,
see.
the staff at Ventana reported their first time up the road going, I'm sorry, up to San Simeon, is that they took a chainsaw with them because there were a few trees across the road. So, the first time you go up, you may have to do some clearing. They had to move some rocks, so just like typical after rain.
Yeah, good.
I have a couple of closing statements on my part. First, I'm reading Dave's chat question about, do we have any efforts to remove the invasive, very spiny, painful yellow star thistle that grows along the disturbed roadside? The answer is not on a yearly basis. We have had times in the past, like a student intern just took that on as a personal vendetta and did remove star thistle, but it just every year it's something that needs to be done. So Dave, since you're a new volunteer, we're putting you in charge of coordinating yellow star thistle control. I hope you'll be willing to take that on. And then finally, I wanted to express some more interest in being contacted by condor biologist Fred Sibley. He started emailing us this week, I think because of this event today, and I didn't even recognize the name at first until he told me who he was. He not only documented condors nesting on those cliffs below High Mountain Lookout years 1996 to 69, he's now going to make a personal visit to the lookout, maybe the first time since the late 1960s. But he's also the father of famous artist David Sibley. So any of you who know anything about the Sibley Field Guide to Birds, Fred Sibley is his father. So, and he emailed me just yesterday his field notes from the Condor observation in Huff's Hole. So I just can't tell you how thrilled I am
I bet.
to now have that in our record keeping. It's amazing to have that kind of information that was unknown to us before. So that was exciting. Okay, that's my concluding statements.
Well, we lost 10 people, but I hope some of the rest of you will go and visit the biddingowl.com or morecoastaudubon.org and target your donation to the lookout or my time.
Just wanted to say thanks, everyone. Good to see you again, Marcel. I went on and bidded on a medium, and so Karen's gonna enjoy that because I'm an extra large and didn't catch that, so she's gonna benefit.
Oh, there's an extra large in there. I got extra large. You got to go
Okay.
back.
Maybe we'll do a BOGA or a bundle. I mean, I'll buy two of
There
them.
you go. There you
But
go.
I'll
And then
be in touch.
we'll
I
make
can be in touch
arrangements.
with you separately, you know.
Okay,
I think
thanks.
you've got me on Facebook or somewhere. We were ex-neighbors down
Yeah.
on Sky Street. So I just want to say thanks, everyone. Go see what the CCSD has to say about the skate park, which is running downstairs while I'm upstairs. I
Okay.
just wanted to say thanks, everyone. Looks amazing. Looking forward to possibly getting involved in all of my abundant free time. But but we'll see how that plays out. But thank you again, and looking forward to visiting in person at some point.
Looking
So,
forward to
Thank
seeing you
you.
there.
right
Yeah,
on. Thanks to you guys. Enjoy the
Thank
rest
you.
of the weekend.
okay,
We'll talk soon.
later.
Bye, Lou.
Bye.
Bye.